Hey everybody, it's Eric Pappenfuss. It's Friday, so it must be a buy day. And today, we are going to talk about Victorian cookbooks. Food, one of my favorite topics, and let's get right to it. We recently had several cookbooks come to us by way of a book auction in New England, and they are particularly interesting because one of the cookbooks, the first one that we're going to talk about, was written by the first celebrity chef in British history. And his name was Alexis Soyer. And there you see him supervising the cooking of this giant drum of soup while you have these sort of soldiers in the background having melons the size of cannonballs. Now, Soyer started out in France. He worked in the Palace of Versailles, but he left for political reasons, came to England before Queen Victoria's coronation, and rose to prominence because he cooked for over 1,000 guests at her coronation. And his food was very well received, and he was the first chef to cook with gas, the first chef to use a sort of refrigeration in his kitchens, and he would give tours of his kitchens and lectures about his kitchens as he cooked for the British aristocracy. In 1851, he opened an emporium across the street from the Crystal Palace exhibition in England, and it was also very well received. Now, he was also famous because he was a great showman, and he bottled his recipes. He was the first celebrity chef to use his likeness to sell things like Soyer sauce. And look at these bottles, which are so collected today because of their designs. And he would he would license his image, he would put the Soyer sauce in the bottles. And he also had a series of inventions which revolutionized cooking, including the portable stove. And let me show you an example of what the portable stove, he called it the magic oven. There's the magic oven and the magic stove. It's basically a Bunsen burner of a stove, but allowed you to cook outdoors. And there he is cooking at the Acropolis, which is a pretty outdoor background if you can find one. Now, Amanda, you're not going to believe this, but there is a connection between Soyer and his sauce and Pennsylvania. Because there was a Pennsylvanian, a Presbyterian minister to be exact, who was dining at one of Soyer's restaurants one evening. He loved the meat sauce. It was fantastic. He called Soyer back from the kitchen and said, "How can I get the recipe?" He said, "Well, it's very simple. I have the recipe and I've published it in my books." And in fact, in this cookbook, here it is. The special Soyer sauce for broiled bones, fowls, meat, fish, etc., etc. Put a tablespoonful of chopped onions in a stew pan. You add a little vinegar. I'm going to summarize this a little bit. Melted butter, sugar, basically a really rich barbecue sauce. Well, he loved this sauce so much that when he came to Meadville, Pennsylvania, he decided he would bottle it. And he made these giant 1-gallon crocks, which you can still find today at antique stores around Pennsylvania, which say Soyer sauce, 1 gallon, Meadville, PA. And he made Soyer sauce all the way from the late 19th century into the early 20th century. And it would still be made today, Amanda, except for one thing, a major invention in the world of fashion, the invention of the zipper. That's right, the zipper was invented and manufactured in Meadville, PA, which, by the way, is western PA, pretty far from here in between Erie and Pittsburgh. And the zipper was so popular that they needed to take over all the manufacturing space in town for that, and this other new invention that they had, which was flexible stays for corsets. No more whalebone. Flexible stays. So between the zipper and the flexible stays, they dumped all the Soyer sauce out. They reconverted the factory into a fashion factory, and this lasted well into the 20th century. And Soyer sauce has not been made, as far as I know, since. Well, that is, since yesterday, when, in fact, I took the recipe and I have made Soyer sauce for us to taste in just a moment. But let me tell you one more interesting fact, or two more, about Soyer. During the Irish potato famine, do you know what he did? He went to Ireland and he created mobile soup wagons, and he took a mobile soup kitchen throughout the countryside feeding people. And then later, during the Crimean War, he went over with Florence Nightingale. And here's a picture of Florence Nightingale in his book. By the way, this book is half campaign memoir of the Crimean War and half cookbook. So you can't go wrong with that. And it is argued that perhaps he saved more soldiers' lives with his cooking than Florence Nightingale did with her nursing. And I would say they worked as a team. So we don't have to say one was more important than the other, but it's really pretty interesting what was going on. And just to give you a sense of the title page of this book, Sawyer's culinary campaign, being historical reminiscences of the late war. This is Crimea. There he is in all of his glory. So that's Sawyer, and that's Sawyer sauce, and that's its connection to Pennsylvania. This is a great, great book. Now, the other book was published about 20 years later, also in England, and it was by a colonel in the British Army who served in India. And his name was Colonel Kenny. He also was a secretary for the sort of brigadier general who was over there. And he really didn't want to fight any battles. All he wanted to do was eat Anglo-Indian cuisine. And he just loved the spices. He loved the fresh vegetables. He loved everything about Indian food. And he realized that in Britain, up to that point, and maybe still to today in some households, they were cooking vegetables all wrong. They were just boiling the life out of the vegetables. They weren't doing anything right. And he decided that he was going to make vegetarianism, especially one of his causes, in one of his later cookbooks. This is a collection of newspaper articles about all the delicious Indian food he was discovering at the time. Here is his recipe for mulligatawny soup. Have you had that at an Indian restaurant, Amanda? Well, he argues that in attempting this, I'm anxious to address my observations to vegetarians, as well as to those who have no objection to eat meat, for I hope to be able to show that a very excellent mulligatawny can be made without any assistance from fish, flesh, or fowl. So it was really his recipes that popularized vegetarianism, and really good vegetarianism, and still Indian food today is a wonderful option if you are a vegetarian. And the other thing which he popularized in this very cookbook was chutney. And chutney became a staple, is still a staple to this day of Anglo-Indian cuisine. There's a wonderful recipe for cucumber chutney. I can't think of anything more British than cucumber chutney, but if you switch out the cucumber in the recipe and you use mango, you get mango chutney. And that is the recipe that I have created. So, Amanda, we are going to try Sawyer sauce by Alexis Sawyer and mango chutney by Colonel Kenny. Let's start with the Sawyer sauce, first time created. Now, this is a dumpling. You'll reach in, but we'll let the reaction show on me. Here we are, dip in the Sawyer sauce. It's gonna taste like a barbecue sauce because it's really rich sugar, brown sugar, little vinegar. Here we go. Not bad. All right. Hold your judgment for a moment. I want to hear the verdict in a minute. But now we're going to try the mango chutney from the Anglo-Indian cookbook, also from the 18th century. Possibly this recipe not manufactured. There's a little cracker to go with it for another 100 years. It's like a palate cleanser after the first. And while you're thinking and about to give a verdict on which one you like the best, we're going to have a pun-off because apparently, if you wrote a cookbook in Victorian England, you had to use puns in your preface. So these are the Sawyer puns. Ready? The author has dished up to the best of his ability, but he doesn't relish the critics. That's Sawyer's puns. All right, and this is Colonel Kenny's puns. They're a little more highfalutin, but nonetheless. Lo, the wings of my ambition. And the fruits of my labor, and I now must tender my best acknowledgments. All right, Sawyer or Kenny in terms of puns?
I think Sawyer.
Okay, I think so too. And Sawyer or Kenny in terms of memorable cuisine?
I think Sawyer again.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah.
Sawyer sauce. It is a sort of sad day. Maybe we should bring it back. Sawyer sauce, we can get the patent from the Meadville factory. All right, we're going to end today, Amanda, with yoga. Now, last week we were doing yoga for wimps, and we've also had an awful lot of spotlights on our feline friends, so I felt it was important to highlight dogs just for a minute. And the doggies in this book, and they go by doggy, are really, really cute. I think the upward-facing dog needs no further explanation than that picture, but my favorite of all the poses comes here from this particular doggy, which is the jowls on the ground, which is for full enjoyment of Balsana. Try to relax, your jowls fully on the ground. Doggy, Yoga for Dogs, our funny book of the week. All right, well, we are only 2 weeks away from the opening of our new collectibles building and the Harrisburg Book Festival. I hope you all will come. And in the meantime, we will be back next week and every week, Fridays at noon, for adventures in the book trade.